Hello to all you aspiring writers and published authors. Welcome to Publishing Power, the show that will help you write more, edit better, and publish professionally. I'm Joellen Nordstrom, your Publishing Power pal, first editing founder and host for this podcast. Now let's talk publishing, editing, and more. Our show notes are included at Publishing Power and firstediting.com. Today, we have with us our marketing expert, Bridget Marmion. Bridget has spent over a decade each at FSG, Random House, and Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, mostly as the Senior Vice President of Marketing. Over her career, Bridget has worked at editorial, publicity, sales, advertising, and marketing, which is everything a person could want. At both FSG and Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Bridget oversaw the marketing of both adult and children's books. So in 2010, I understand you launched a full-service marketing firm, Your Expert Nation, Inc., and now you're relaunching as Bridget Marmion Book Marketing. Welcome, Bridget. So glad you're here.
Great to be here.
So glad that we met. We met at New York City at the Book Expo, and you are a marketing expert, and you have this amazing background with so much more experience than most people can help to accumulate in a lifetime. And I think that is what people really are searching for nowadays, because it's not just about the new exciting technology. You still got to understand how all the publishing works and how people can get their books and themselves in front of the audiences. So thanks for coming to share your insights with our Publishing Power listeners today.
Thank you.
Awesome. I know that you've got a presentation for us today. Would you tell us a little bit about what we're going to find out?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me, because having worked with authors literally since I was 17 years old, wow. Nothing gives me more pleasure than being able to share information. So today, and it was a great pleasure to meet you at BEA in New York, and to take this opportunity to talk to authors about how they can connect with readers. Because having literally grown up with authors, nothing gives me greater pleasure than to share some of the tips that are some of the most important thing writers can and should know. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share, I kind of honed it down to some of the 5 tips I wish every writer knew. And I am, of course, going to be quite general, because I hope the people listening and watching will be at various stages in their writing career: fiction, nonfiction, adult books, children's books. So I really did hone in on the messages and the information that I think will help regardless of where you are in your publishing career.
That's great. That's great. Well, let's get started. I'm just going to be your audience here, and you can walk us all through this, and we will learn everything together here. So here is your presentation.
Well, that's me again. And yes, as Joellen said, I've worked in virtually every department of publishing except finance and production, and at, I think, the most distinguished publishers in the industry, along with, that means, and this was most important, along with the most distinguished editors, salespeople, and authors in the business. And I continue this day to have that privilege. And so, like all of you, I'm learning every day, including tomorrow and later tonight. Because yes, a lot of publishing takes place in restaurants and bars. Because yes, this continues to be publishing today. And when I launched my own marketing firm 8 years ago, Your Expert Nation, I began working with people who are what we call self-published. I continue working with authors who publish by large houses and smaller houses, but I also will work with people who are self-published, which brings its own collection of challenges. But it's interesting, Joellen, because the questions they have and the challenges they face are really not that different than the authors who are published by houses large and small. So I think this information I'm about to share applies regardless of how you have decided to publish. So I begin with one of the first questions that we're always asked, and I say we because this is virtually every colleague in publishing. When should you begin your plans to market your book? And then I'll move into the first question each author must answer honestly. So here's tip number 1. And my strategic partner said when we first presented together, I think it was at either Social Media Week or Brooklyn Book Festival, and I opened the presentation by saying the most successful launches begin while the author is writing the book. And Rich said, Bridget, don't say that, you're going to scare the writers because they're trying to write the book. He said, Rich, I'm going to say it because it's true. Yeah. It was true in 1970. it's going to be, it's true today, and it's going to be true in 2070.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that the most successful books launch because the author has begun building relationships as they're writing the book.
Right.
In fact, on the website, on our website, yourexpertnation.com, on our resources page, there's a wonderful blueprint for launching a book while you're writing it. And that's from the Wall Street Journal. And it's about the publication of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Slough.
Okay.
And essentially what it does is walk you through how you start building relationships. And let me be very clear. Those relationships, and again, I know we have some novelists probably listening, looking, some writers of nonfiction, some authors of adult books, fiction books. Of course, I'm going to speak generally, but those relationships include VIPs in your industry. You might call them influencers. You might call them big mouths. You might call them thought leaders. It also includes booksellers. It includes librarians who have, frankly, the most powerful network in the world. I swear to God, they created the network, the internet. It wasn't the military. If you befriend a librarian, you have, and they love you and your books and your writing, you've got a network throughout the country, especially young adult librarians. They're powerful. So it really is a question of building support. But again, how do you gain support? You support, and among writers, other writers. So how do you gain support? By supporting those people, by being a patron of that bookstore, by being a patron of that library, by supporting those writers and authentically supporting their writing and talking about their books while you're, in the process of writing yours, because it's human nature.
Right.
If you walk into a bookstore a month before your book comes out and introduce yourself for the first time, they'll be professional, of course, especially if you're a local author, but you're going to get a much different response if you're a patron who's been supporting their store for years and they recognize. It's human interest. It's human nature. So tip number one, build relationships. And that all happens organically while you're writing your book. And if it's a nonfiction book, of course. And that's what Rebecca Slough did. She was naturally researching in that particular subject area. And all along the way, she was meeting people who, of course, were going to be interested in the book she would write. But she didn't walk around saying, buy my book. She built relationships because she was interested in those people. And then later, she sent them an email simply letting them know what she was up to. So tip number one, the best launch begins while the author is writing the book. And I'll tell you this, and I hope you're all sitting down, because in 2015, Forbes let us all know that year, 1 million books were released. So it's 1 million books released each year. You can bet it takes a bit to cut through the noise. And so even if your book is ready for the world, the question is there a community of readers waiting for your book?
Okay.
So tip number two, it's about relationships and those big mouths, those queen bees, that community there waiting for your books, and we're ready to support it at publication. So now I want to move into the first question each author must answer honestly. And at face value, I'm looking over, of course, because I have notes. You would think I know this by heart, but frankly, if I didn't have notes, you'd have to go home and get your pajamas because we'd be talking for days. But the question each author must honestly ask themselves sounds very simple until you answer succinctly and honestly. And that is, why are you writing a book? Why do you want to publish this book? Now, there's no wrong answer. And one of the answers might be, I've got important information I want to share. And in fact, it might attract new clients. Or I've got a family story that I want to record and share with future generations. Or I've got an entertaining story to tell. Those are all absolutely legitimate reasons. But until you identify that and are very clear about that, you won't know who your audience is. And once you do identify that, you can begin thinking about so much more about your book, and frankly, how to publish it properly and how to market it properly, because you'll be that much closer to understanding who your audience is. Right. Because yes, writing a book is a passion, but publishing a book and creating that book and bringing it to readers is a business. And it can get very expensive. And it can get very time consuming and can get very disheartening. So unless you begin by understanding, and as I said, it's a process. I've worked with writers my whole life. I know it's torture to write a book. And I salute anybody who has had the courage to put that creativity down on paper, because it does take courage. Not only creativity, but then the courage to put it down on paper and to make it available for the world to see, because you know the world's going to judge and have a point of view. And in fact, it was Jonathan Galassi, the editor-in-chief of Faris Chasharu, which won, I think, 8 Nobel Prizes while I was there. And it was Jonathan, the editor-in-chief, who said, writers are the bravest among us. So I salute anyone who's got the courage to write a book, without question. And that's half the work done, because the other half is to find the readers and bring their eyes to your work. So please do yourself the favor and the important work of identifying why you're writing the book, which will lead you to understand who your audience is. Because once you know that, once you know who your audience is, that's gonna, as I said, that's gonna help you begin to understand how you can market your book. Because once you do have your audience in mind, you begin to think, where do they live? Where do they gather? How can I get to them? And most importantly, what are the words that would attract them? What's the information they need? And that will lead you to your most important marketing tool. Because in this digital age, one of your most important marketing tools is your title or your subtitle. And I am talking about fiction or nonfiction. Fiction, of course, is a slightly different conversation, but not so different. Just make sure I don't get ahead of myself. You've got to create a title and a subtitle and a description of your book, which includes flap copy ultimately, or description on the back of your paperback. Picturing your ideal reader, your ideal customer, or the person who'll buy your book. How would that person, what are the words that person would type into their computer if they were looking for that information, looking for that entertainment? Because those are the key words. If you want your book to show up in the results. So if you want to reach that audience, you just start thinking the way that audience thinks. It's not about what you want to shout at them. It's about your anticipating the questions they have, or the story they want to hear, or the words they would be, the questions they want answered, and having that be part of how you describe your book, which presumably is part of your book, if that's why you're writing it for that audience. And that will bring your book into the search results. And what we're talking about now is something called metadata. Those keywords, those keyword phrases are something called metadata. And that is the least sexy word and one of the most crucial elements in any campaign these days in this digital age. There's no single bullet anymore. Everybody thinks, for probably half my career was the Oprah show. Get the book on author on Oprah and it's going to be a bestseller. Yes, some of them were, not all of them. But these days, especially as media is so diffused, there is no single bullet. There's no single way to sell a book. And metadata, again, is not the single thing. But if you don't have very rich metadata, and for those of you who don't know what metadata is, it's the data behind the data. It's the data that basically explains what your book is. It's keywords and phrases. It's BISAC codes that helps computers find your website. It explains what your book is. You don't have to become an expert. You don't have to become a coder just respect the word, learn a little bit about it, and pay attention to it, and perhaps hire somebody who can enhance it and make sure it's maximized for you. We offer that service. I'm sure a lot of companies do. But it's something that even some large houses consider housekeeping. And meanwhile, it's one of the least expensive and most important ways you can get your book discovered today.
Yeah.
So tip number 3 and 4, most important marketing tool, your book's title, which again, if you do it properly, and not frankly from your own arrogance about what you want the title to be, but thinking instead about the reader of your book, your ideal reader, and how they might discover it. And then secondly, enriching your metadata, so it'll show up in search results, and writing the description in a way that your ideal reader would describe what they're looking for or ask questions. And here's a perfect example. Because publishers, we try our best. Publishers try their best, and there's so many good people, but here's a perfect example. Mystery books. You're doing the metadata on a book about 3 months before publication date, and mystery books have different categories. There's a British cozy, there's a detective novel, there's a legal thriller, and there's noir. Okay. And then somebody said, finally, when they started looking at how people find books and the words they use, I don't think ever in the case of human history has anybody gotten out of bed in the morning and said, I want to read a noir memoir, a noir mystery book. Nobody talks that way. Nobody thinks that way. Mm-hmm. So you got to read, you got to write, and especially now with search becoming more and more voice dependent. It's not right now, but it's coming around if any of our writers are younger. Keep that in mind with Alexa and all the AI assistants. People are saying, Alexa, do this for me, do that. So search is becoming voice activated. So it's becoming more and more important that your description of your book or your title be very naturally written the way people talk. So that's my next tip for you. Describe your book and title your book the way that your target audience would actually put it into their search engine, type it into their computer, or talk about it.
Right. I've heard people talking about, like, I like to read about, mummies or vampires, and I want a vampire mystery. And you go, really? and that's it, vampire mystery series. That's got a huge saying, and people say nobody's reading vampires. But if your people are reading vampires, then you need to find those people, because that's what you wrote.
Paranormal romance after Twilight.
Oh yeah.
I think that's when I don't think paranormal romance was a word, never mind a category. After Twilight, it damn well was. It was half the category in the store for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You got to talk the way your readers and describe the book the way they're thinking about it, not shoveling out the way you wish it were described in your fantasy head, because that's not how they'll find it.
Right.
So let's talk about developing your campaign. And I said it before, but it's worth repeating, that writing is a passion. And for some people, it's an irresistible urge. It's something you've got to do. But publishing is a business. And so you absolutely, I'm sure Joelle and her team have said this to you before, you simply do have to learn how to write it, how to understand or create a profit and loss statement. So you can establish what you can comfortably afford to invest in, among other things, marketing your book. Mm-hmm. So, and tip number 5, and this is frankly why a lot of agents really love me, because many writers are kind of private people, and the idea of social media scares the hell out of them. They just don't really want to put their lives out there. And I think I'm one of the first marketing people that they would say out loud, if you don't want to do it, you're not going to be good at it. And my job is to find the way that you are comfortable connecting with your readers, or connecting with people. And let's go from there. So my tip number 5 is that social media is only one tool in the media toolkit. It's a very important one, And it can be incredibly valuable if you're very good at it. And frankly, it's important to have some media presence, and certainly to have a website, and a very good professional website, because media use it as well. There's no question, if you're a writer, the first thing media do, and frankly, anybody who's going to consider hiring you as a speaker, very first thing they do is Google your name, no question. And if you don't have a website, then it's like a patchwork quilt. They'll just piece together whatever information you have on LinkedIn, you have here, you have there. And then they'll make up their story about you. You don't want that. You want a professional website that presents you, emphasizing what you want about your life, your story, and your priorities. So in terms of developing your campaign, consider who you are. This is certainly how, in very broad strokes, how I began developing a promotional campaign. And actually, I want to say one more word about social media. Sure. It's certainly the darling these days. It's the it girl right now of how you sell, or the centerpiece of most campaigns. But in fact, Harvard Business Review said recently, and then it's been repeated over and over again quite recently, is that in fact it's email marketing by far has a higher ROI and certainly a higher conversion rate by far than social media. So again, it gets back to, and now I'm going to, in very broad strokes, tell you how I approach and begin to develop a promotional campaign. And this is basically a recipe that any author can use. First, you consider, who are you? What are your credentials? Why should anybody listen to you? And again, if you're writing fiction, it's slightly different. And if you're writing fiction, I hope you have some people endorsing your work, your wonderful storytelling. There goes back to relationships. Have you been supporting those writers? They'll be there for you. Number two, what's your message? Who is your audience? Where do they live? And how are you comfortable connecting with them and connecting with your audience? And then what is your budget? Not just in money, but in time that you can afford to comfortably invest in marketing your book. And that analysis of your target audience that we talked about before and the budget is going to help determine the elements of the campaign that are right for you. Is it going to be events? Is it going to be speaking engagements? Is it going to be collecting emails, which is hugely important? That's like gold. Is it going to be publicity, which doesn't work for everybody, it's very expensive? Is it going to be pricing promotions, Goodreads giveaways, as well as the right distribution and the formation of price? What's the right format for your book, the right price, and again, the right title? So Bridget Marmion Book Marketing, currently called Your Expert Nation. I organized my company very deliberately to be very fluid so that I could offer writers whatever support they needed based on what their goals were and what their budget is in this very quickly changing landscape. We do offer strategic marketing advice, social media coaching, email marketing, metadata reviews of websites and of book listings, publicity, website project development, virtually anything an author can offer, because as Joellen said, I've worked in so many houses and on so many campaigns that I can see around the corner and kind of anticipate before an author can what is likely to be needed at that stage in their publishing life. But it all does begin on what you know you can afford, time-wise and budget-wise. And that's what any professional writer should be developing as part of their expertise. Learning about the process and including what's fair to you and your family to invest in helping reach your readers, as well as mindfulness about what you're good at. How are you effective connecting with people? And what is your promotional ammunition? So who should work with us? Writers who have established your budget of time and money. And probably about 8 months before your release of your book is the best time to start talking, because honestly, it's that far in advance. And we work I'm working with an author now who's just in the process of writing her second book, but 8 months before a release date is usually the best time to start talking.
Mm-hmm.
And please contact my project manager, who is available at yourexpertnation@gmail.com if you'd like us to send you a list of our services. But most of all, I want to truly say thanks for giving me this time. And as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about talking to authors about how they can connect with readers. And I'm sorry I had to be so general, because obviously we're working together. It would involve a deep dive into your work and how you are comfortable connecting with people. But I wish everybody very, very good luck in connecting with the readers that you wrote your book for.
I agree. Thank you so much. I think one of the interesting points that you mentioned here that I kind of want to point out is that it's not just the money budget, it's the time, because you have invested so much time in this up to now. And so often authors think, okay, now I'm done, I can hand this off. But it's still your baby, and it ultimately represents you. It's an extension of you. So you can't separate from that. And nobody's going to care about your child or your baby or anything as much as you are. So you need to have that time and energy put aside in addition to the money that you're going to be paying. And the less you pay, the more you have to do on your own. And that's why, you have traditional publishing, you have the self-publishing, you have a hybrid, where you go through the services. So it's all important to understand that. And I think it's really good when we reach out to somebody with this experience that you can get a price quote, and then not just that, but to also say, and how much time do I have to put in here? Because some people have been blown out of the water when they say, you're going to go do book signings, or we need you to show up here, we need you to write, all of these articles about yourself, or make these posts, or come on blogs or podcasts. And that's all time. And you think, it's 20 minutes here, 30 minutes. No, it's 2 to 3 hours for each of these, minimum. And it's a big investment.
It's interesting that you say that, Joellen, because the reality is that new media, because of course, when I started working in publishing, there were literally 4 broadcast networks in the US, and I'm being generous, including WNET, it was ABC, NBC, CBS. And there were about 11 radio shows that were really important. And there were, I'm talking the US, of course, but there were then about 25 booksellers. We all knew each other personally. And I could literally launch a bestseller if I got something, if we chose our books properly, very carefully, because credibility is key. But if we could make things happen within 2 weeks. And then the media changed, and then it got very diffused with the dawn of the internet. So my point is that it's not because publishers aren't doing enough, it's the nature of new media. It's that the good news and the bad news is that the playing field was leveled. Now everyone has access to their audience. That means that the deluge of information is endless to everybody. And that's why it takes longer than ever to develop a marketing campaign and to cut through the noise. But as you said, it also means more work. And it does mean, sadly, that it is up to each author to connect with. You can't have somebody else do it. And I can tell, and most readers can tell, if the social media is handed off to somebody's assistant. And you know what? It doesn't work. Don't bother. But meanwhile, that author might be great at doing something different. And there might be a different way. Maybe it's strategic advertising that works for that book. But you're right. It's a lot of work.
It's huge. And one of the things I took away from the book expo that really stood out in my mind, and it's something that, I don't have any contribution to as an editor, is that, if you can come in with your own audience, if you already have, not just the keywords and the avatar of what this person looks like, but the actual people who are following you, or you're following the author who's in the same genre, and, you already in there actively, and they know you, and they're anticipating that, then you get a step up. Doesn't make a guarantee, but they really want to know, okay, how many followers do you have on Facebook? How many followers do you have on? And wow, how hard is that? Before you even get out.
The feared question in publishing for those approaching traditional publishers, or even an agent, because these days it's almost as hard to get an agent as it is to get a publisher, is what's your platform?
Exactly.
And that's code for, and these days I hate to say it, and there's probably no single number, but yeah, if you've got 500,000 Twitter followers, you're fine. I'm sorry, but I don't work with writers, and I don't know many writers. There's a handful, We all know them. Who are those people? But that's not true of most. And then the question becomes, but here's what I want to tell you, that for those of us who are working with writers, or those of us who are writers, without even, yes, it is important to develop a following. And that's what I'm saying. You have to create an audience waiting for your book. But even without having X millions, I know you heard a lot about that at BA, they want an audience because it's a big investment for publishers to bring out a book. And the bottom line is that they want to know that there's an audience waiting for that book. But you can have promotional ammunition, is what I call it, even if you don't have 50,000 followers on Facebook or 500,000 followers on Instagram. It's great, it's valuable. But if you gather emails, if you start gathering emails, if you're a speaker somewhere, you're teaching, gathering emails, getting permission, doing newsletters, again, that's where the strategy comes in. There are ways to do it, don't be discouraged. But yes, you're absolutely right. That's what publishers are looking for. They want to know there's an audience waiting for your book. And it takes a long time to cut through the noise and to develop that audience waiting for your book.
Right. It's a double-edged sword. You have to be able to find your audience and get their attention. You have to find the agents and get their attention. It's never ending, you know. You really have to be more than a writer nowadays, and or you have to be so phenomenal that everybody just naturally follows you. And wow, it's a lot. But it's great.
I don't want to discourage people because, again, when I talk to people, and I'm privileged to work with some of the best editors in the business, and the first point is to write the best book possible. Exactly. And then you know what? Sometimes, depending on the book what the book is, maybe you can place it somewhere. Maybe you can get an excerpt here or there. Maybe you can put it into submit it to a prize. Maybe, there are different strategies. And again, I don't want to waste your time with the readers, but the listeners. But the bottom line is that write the best book you can. That's number one. But along the way, there are very organic things you can do. You can you can take pictures of places where you are while you're researching the book, or even if it's fiction, and that might be marking collateral later, and get to know people. Support your local bookseller, support your librarian, support names, and there are ways to grow a network of people who support you. But yes, it's not an easy life. No, being a writer, don't get in it for the money. If you listen to me, do not get in it for the money. Do not get in it for the stardom. Do not get in it to become a bestseller. If that is why you're in this business, go home right now. Become a fireman. And certainly you're not in that for the money either. But at least you get a pension at the end of it.
Very true. Very true. Well, that is the word there. So I think we got quite a bit of good information, and I really think, we could go on for hours because marketing is as wide as, you can imagine, and the publicity and everything that goes along with that is a huge realm that most writers aren't really thinking about. And as you said, starting 8 months out before they're launching, I've heard it again and again, and it's so important to have your strategy from the beginning to end. So let's hope that somebody takes this to heart and they're in the middle of their book and this helps them on that next step, and we'll definitely get in touch with you. Again, today we've had Bridget Marmion with us from YourExpertNation.Inc., which is soon going to be Bridget Marmion Book Marketing. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks a million, Joanne. Great to see you again.
Great to see you. Take care.